All right, in the interest of time, we'll kick everything off. We'll get started. Let me start with some introductions and kind of refresh everybody's memory on the title of the webinar, which is SEO Strategies Redefined, Lessons from Google's Documentation Leak. But it's really to talk about the leak, but also just how to make SEO accessible to the various segments of the industry. We have a good number of people who have joined. Please feel free to ask questions. We have a number of people who will listen to it later, so that's okay too. Please feel free, we send the recording out. Please feel free to send it around to whoever you like. Rules of the game on the masterclass is always, well, we try not to make this an infomercial. We're respectful of our competitors, blah, blah, blah. We're trying to have a kind of conversation. I always say that if we're at Inman or at some conference and we're sitting at the bar, and we would be sitting at the bar, I'm not going to be ashamed of that, that we would be having this conversation. And the goal is to educate people otherwise. So that is the goal of the masterclass. Joining us, we have Michael Phelan, Vice President of Marketing and Technology Consulting at T3, and acting CTO of C21.ca. Eric Stegman, who's with the Tribus Group and is CEO, and Emily Coble, who is SEO Content and Marketing Manager for Union Street Media. So we've done a prep call, and I think we have the right people for this, so I'm super stoked. So let me just go ahead and kick it off, and let's talk about the first thing. Oh, and by the way, other rule of the masterclass is this could be a 15-minute masterclass. It could be 45. We don't care. We're never going to stretch it out. We're going to milk the topic for what it's worth and then call it. But again, if you think of questions, throw them up. I'll be reading during. So I'll wait till the end, but unless I think I can insert one in. So first thing, what is SEO? Okay, we all know it stands for search engine optimization, but like, what is it today? What's really a good definition of search engine optimization in sort of today's environment? Again, we're going to answer these questions largely in real estate industry focused. So that could be MLS consumer facing sites, portals, brokerages, whatever floats your boat, prop tech. So but largely we're gonna focus on real estate. Although I assume the same rules would apply elsewhere. So Mike, you're the consultant. And you've been on a master class before, so we'll pick on you first.
I'm gonna let Orbit.
And then we'll see what the consultant says, and then we'll ask Eric. What
In
would you
very
say?
layman's terms, and I always joke that I'm the least tech guy you'll meet, is that it's about getting your site found, right? I mean, at the end
Yep.
of the day, SEO is about getting your site found, and there are a number of factors that go into that process. In fact, this leaked document that you referenced is like they claim there's 1,000 plus ranking factors that Google
Mm-hmm.
takes. So pretty difficult to gain. So I think anybody that promises short-term results or can guarantee results, they're maybe not being terribly honest. So I think it's all about getting your site found, and there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah. What about you? What about you, Eric?
Building upon what Michael said, I think if you're a good SEO in our space, and unfortunately, there's a lot of charlatans in our space that pretend they know SEO and really don't, or there are people from outside the space. And I would make the argument real estate SEO is incredibly different from just any other SEO that's out there. For the primary reason behind that being that when you SEO products on Amazon or something like that, you don't have 1,000 other websites with the exact same content on it. And so you have to learn to really SEO, particularly in a world where you have a lot of duplicate content. But the thing that I would add to what Michael said there is, in the world where we sit today versus maybe 15 years ago, it follows the Sun Tzu rule of you fight the battles you know you can win. So there's battles that are out there that have been fought and lost, and there's battles out there that have yet to be taken on. And I think that's the place that a lot of brokers and MLSs can win in those spaces. Or if you're a mega brokerage or an enterprise brokerage or an MLS, a big MLS, there are places that you can win that you probably don't think you can win at right now, but it's worth the assessment to figure that out.
Yeah, and I think we'll go into those details. What about you, Emily? I mean, do you also feel that real estate SEO is dramatically different?
I do. I think there are a lot of similarities, but we do face some challenges may not be the right word, but there are, things in real estate that make what we do different than someone who's working on e-commerce. And kind of echoing what both Michael and Eric said, like I always look at SEO as like your foundation, right? Everything else you're going to do online is built upon the SEO. And in order to see success there, it really has to have that quality base layer to continue to grow.
Interesting. And then let's kind of dig into that a little bit. Like some of the stuff we talked about on the prep call is demand gen versus lead focused. Interacting with the brand beforehand. Talking a little bit maybe about, Zillow has probably done SEO better than almost any portal out there, just period. I mean, they are probably the first to really go grab a big share of the market, sort of organically and through SEO strategies. Trulia was the first one to really go buy keywords aggressively, in effect locking them down, if you're familiar with the industry. So can we talk about that a little bit, and also about desktop versus mobile? So that's a bunch of different things to unpack. So you can dig into, I know, I just read through the list, I realize that. Okay, you cannot laugh at the host, Mike. Well, you can, but you have to wait until later. I know, it's like 5 topics, but we have like 10 more, so that's okay. Okay, well then I'm not calling on you first. Okay, so Emily, of those topics, we have to have fun in masterclass. Emily, of those topics, which one do you feel like, pick one, or that strikes you as being particularly relevant to the definition? Maybe that's a better way to put it, Mike. Particularly relevant to the definition of SEO, like, what's really kind of jumps out at you. Is it desktop versus mobile? Is it about demand gen versus lead focused? That kind of thing.
Yeah. I think kind of thinking about how real estate SEO differs from, other industries. And knowing that our lead cycle is so much longer, SEO like really plays into being able to be found at every stage of the leads journey, right? Like the person that converts on day one isn't necessarily going to buy a home within those first couple of weeks. So you need to be interacting and findable in search for every stage of that leads journey to ultimate transaction.
Yeah, so you're really voting for brand, not even desktop versus mobile or demand gen versus leave it. You're really saying they have to get to your site first to see you as part of the journey.
I think part of that is like the mobile versus desktop. And I think the leak especially kind of nailed that down even more than what we knew before, is that mobile is the most important. The majority of users are coming from your mobile site. And if you don't have a user experience that's optimized for that type of user, larger buttons versus in-text links, that's gonna, lead to them going to your competitors or, moving on to a different stage of their journey.
All right, well, I'll segue to Eric on that, because I think one of the things we talked about prep call, right, Eric, was that it depends on the market segment you're going after too. Like if you're going after, the MLS side of things, right? That's going to be a little bit different, right, Eric? In terms of mobile versus desktop, and I think demand gen versus lead, right? So it also depends on sort of what the market. So I'll let you talk on that for a minute.
So,
Please.
I mean, there's a reason why, you need both an SEO and an SEM strategy. SEO is going to pull people generally more top of funnel, 300-400 days away from making a purchase. SEM is generally going to pull people a little bit closer in to make a purchase, because they're willing to fill out a form from an ad they've filled out online.
That's true.
However, there's only about 11% of the population that will click on an ad and actually go through the process of filling out the form based upon the ad. So you're losing a bunch of people if you're only focused on the SEM portion of it. Plus, think about all the people that you have that are SEM that came through a flow and a squeeze page or something like that you have. They're not ready, like Emily said, they're not necessarily ready to buy something today or tomorrow. They may be a little further away, like 90 days away from a zero moment of truth to be able to go and find something, in which case then your SEO strategy or retargeting strategies become very, very important to make sure that you're staying top of mind. So when that true zero moment of truth, the zero moment of truth is the point in which the consumer says, I'm actually ready to get off my couch and make a buying decision. and they really want to start the process to go learn. When that 0 moment of truth happens, you know, you hope your ad shows up, but in the end, you got to have built that name recognition, that brand, that concept of I know this market, or my brokerage, or me as an agent, or me as an MLS. We are the people for your market, because you want them to go there instead of going to a national portal type website.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's well said about SEO versus SEM, not that we talked about. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I love this conversation because I think a lot of brokerages where they fall down with SEO is they don't have a strategy, right? And as Eric and Emily each talked about various aspects of that strategy, right? That's the issue, right? They don't, a lot of brokerages don't understand what they're trying to build. You know, you asked a question, demand gen versus lead gen, and that's an area that I've been doing some work and research on lately, you know, and I think that's the starting point, right? Is like thinking about how do you build interest and awareness for your brokerage so that when they need those services, when they're at that stage that Emily mentioned, they're ready to engage. And you reinforce all of that with what Eric said, right? You know, all the different strategies that you can do. So making sure that you've got a user experience that people want to engage with. And that's what we've learned from the leak more than anything. There was all sorts of salacious things in there, but at the end of the day, if you really like read it, it was like Google still cares the most about whether people actually want to be on your site doing things.
100%.
And so I think a lot of brokerages lose track of that piece. It's like, if your site looks and acts like every single other person's site, it's not going to be memorable, and people aren't going to remember to come back, and they're not going to be able to do the things they want to do. So build a memorable site that is easy to use, that people can do the things they want to do on it. And you'll have good SEO. You'll be able to be found.
All right, so maybe this is backwards forwards, but I don't think so. And I think I'll keep you talking for a second as in your consultant hat. Why care about SEO at all? Should everybody care about SEO? So first, like we're trying to do this in a way, yeah, this is a class. What is SEO and why care in the first place? Because we did say like, you know, like not everybody should care, right? I mean, let's take the elephant out of the room. I mean, Eric talks a lot of prep call about people sort of selling a I don't know, like selling a bag of nothing, for lack of better terminology, right, Eric? But making promises they can't keep and making people care. Should they all care? Is it about leads? Leads are expensive. Is it about branding? You know, look, we do this at Local Logic all the time. We ask this question. You know, we need to be a brand people know who we are. Part of the reason we do this webinar, of course, for brand awareness. Does brand awareness get you leads? Do you care? You know what I mean? Like you ask that question, like, so, and organic is hard. So all of this is pretty hard. So why? And Michael, as a consultant, I'm going to point to you first. Like, what do you tell people if they ask that question? And I bet you've gotten it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so that one of the things we were all joking about right before we got on was not all brokerages are the same, which is why it's so hard to answer.
Right.
And it seems like a cop out to the question, but I'll just say that it really
But
depends.
it's not. That's the problem. It's not.
Every day we get a call like, who's the best website provider, or who's the best CRM, or who, and I'm like,
Right.
I can't answer that question for you until I know more about your brokerage.
Totally.
You know, and we have what we call a T3. We have the brokerage technology profile that before we engage with any brokerage, we have a series of questions that we ask them that helps us to develop a baseline understanding of kind of who they are as a brokerage. And then we can begin to make some recommendations. So to your question, should everybody care about SEO? No. Now,
Right.
no, but I will tell you, I have a bias. If those of you that don't know from where I came from before I worked as a consultant, I do think it's all, if you want to have a holistic approach as a brokerage and you want to play for the long game, then you have to be thinking about SEO at some point in time. So given where brokerages are in their life cycle, it may not make sense now, but at some point in time, if they want to play the long game, they're going to have to think about SEO. And whether that is the brokerage website or that may be agent websites, those can be two totally different strategies that a brokerage could undertake. But just knowing where their digital storefront can be found and how do they make that digital storefront as easy as possible for people to find.
And it can be confusing because if you're talking to a large brokerage, the SEO strategy, quote unquote, for an agent site is different than a brokerage site. And I will segue to Eric, and then I'll go to you, Emily. But Eric, like you do a lot of MLS, not exclusively, but you do a lot of MLS work. And it can actually be a political issue as to how much, So I try and throw little curveballs in my thing that it doesn't come up in the prep class. So here's my curveball, Eric, that you can handle any curve, that's for sure. Some of the MLSs don't have consumer facing sites because they don't, and it's funny, I am a proponent of consumer facing sites for MLSs because I believe that a lead that comes in through an MLS site is 30 to 40% cheaper than an agent who gets it off Zillow, Realtor, or their franchise. But one MLS said to me, I was saying, well, he's like, yeah, but they think that the members think that the MLS is then charging them more for the SEO and the content on the site. So how do you address all of that?
So, the
Not a
difference.
small question, just a small question.
We have this division, Solid Earth, that we work with MLSs and associations, and they've been doing websites for MLS associations for 15 years. And so they've waded this water extensively.
Right, exactly.
And what happens is, boards change their mind, right? The benefit drawback of our industry is we're a volunteer-led a group of associations and MLSs for the most part.
Yep.
And boards sometimes change their mind.
Yep.
The thing that I can say is, in almost every circumstance, when you show a board data, unless they're just dead set on something, they will act in the best interest of themselves and the MLS. And when you've got an MLS or an association that's thinking about doing a website, what you have to show them is the data that shows it's not a zero sum where we're pulling away from your website and getting you your own leads that you're now having to pay the MLS for. It's actually because we're building the brand and building the understanding of that local MLS. It's competing against a portal website, a Zillow or whatever, when they've got their listings on something that's local to just that market. Because when you can compete locally and you've got every listing locally and you can send ranking signals to Google that this is the true source of truth for all listings in the market and not a jumbled mess from IDX from all the different listings that are out there. When you show enough correct ranking signals to Google that this is the MLS that really has the data, those sites can crush the major portal websites. Example, we've got
that's very true.
New Hampshire and Vermont, and they consistently crush the portals.
Absolutely. Well, when I was running List Hub and we did all the traffic reports, the regional brokers that spent money, whether it's, to your point, it's not just about ads, but like on benches, had much more sort of localized brand awareness, which went to local expertise. And on that note, Emily, for you guys that focuses a lot of you serve some very large brokers, you serve some very small ones. You have a pretty good range at Union Street. What do you do in terms of, as the SEO expert at Union Street, like how do you handle that in terms of because to Michael's point, different needs, different, different market segments, but Eric's right too. Even a small broker can become an important local expert, right? So
absolutely.
How do you handle that?
Respectfully kind of disagree with Michael a little bit on that.
Do it.
Everyone should
Mix it
care
up.
about SEO. I think what it comes down to is like expectations and goals, right? So a brand new team or brokerage that's coming onto the scene with a new domain needs to have different expectations and goals than a larger brokerage who's all across the United States, and those strategies are going to be very different. But if you don't start, you can never build upon that, right? So I would say building your domain authority early is always a smart play, even if you don't necessarily like 100% dive into it right away. At least start somewhere. And that's, that's what
like it.
Expectations. You're not going to immediately knock your competitors out of the park day one, but you can't get there unless you start.
Unless you start, you're not going to go. So I think that is, Michael, I think that's a great caveat. We'll merge it and we'll go to the next topic, but I think that's a fair point, which is I had a company that asked me for advice on what website vendor to use, and they wanted to I said it's the same thing that Michael said, but it's also what you're saying. I'm like, what is your goal? Is your goal to bring on top agents, or are you just trying to recruit for numbers? But they wanted to build a national brokerage. And I said, look, you're not going to do it all at once. Like you have to prioritize your needs. Similar to SEO, you have to ask yourself what your goals are, which is why people do use T3, right? Is to help them focus on their goals, and to put one step. But I think your point is so well taken, Emily. Like if that's your end goal, even if you're small today, you're not going to simply say, well, I've got 50,000, I guess I'll go up to the top. I mean, that is the conundrum that is Google, that is so significant about the leakage of this document, right? All right, let's move to the next topic, which I think will take us a while anyway, which is content and engagement and keywords. And I'll just read through the bullets now, which is generally like, again, we try not to be this infomercial, but this is where we typically, I would say that local logic is a big player in this. This is where we do focus do believe we're a component of SEO simply because part of the leakage, and this is not a plug, this is simply just to talk about the leakage, the leak from Google, which is that people that they care about content, they care about engagement. They are looking for how long somebody stays on a page, how much they click on a page, how long they're there. This is something I think we thought we knew mattered, that the document then confirmed, and this is where the document was good for companies like Google, because we believe that as well. How often the content is updated, et cetera. So I will go back to you, Michael, like about that. We'll just round robin it a bit. In terms of content, like how do you talk to people about it? What do you say? Like, how do you guide them in terms of, and again, different segments, different types of content, right? Different market segments.
Yeah, I'll answer from the perspective of a brokerage, just to kind of,
Well, you are acting CTO of one, so yeah, do it.
Yeah, to give it a filter on that. I think that at the end of the day, not to oversimplify, engagement is the absolute most important thing that Google's looking at, right? They want to know that if people land on that page, that people do something there and they find value. And I think so there was a lot of other factors that we all thought were important, and they are important, but to a much lesser extent than we thought they might be. And they've put so much more, the leak of the document really emphasized user engagement. So to your question, what document? What content? First thing is, you be prepared to feed the monster, right? I think a lot of brokerages think they're going to hire somebody to write an article, 2 or 3 times. Eric made this point when we were prepping.
Well, that's what they were doing. That's what the industry has been doing for 10 years, is a little newsletter that goes out.
Yeah, then they stop. They do it for a couple of months.
Right.
They don't see any lead. And so then they stop, right? And I think they have to understand the role of that content. And they have to understand that they're going to have to continue to develop content over an extended period of time. And that is an expense, right? And I don't think AI is going to solve that, right? But, I think AI can be a part of that solution. We're getting a lot of calls about that. That was one of the things working in the document, was that AI is not necessarily a negative indicator, right? So there is a place to use AI. I would not use it wholesale. I would not use it to write my content without people engaging with that content, live human beings, but you can be used to help to scale content generation. So you got to be prepared to generate a lot of content, and that content has to be unique and different and memorable and something that people want to consume.
And I do think it has to be interactive. It reminds me, you know what I always think of? I always think of like when I was a kid, and I'm just old enough that when museums were out, it was all very flat. So it was super boring for a kid to walk through a museum. They maybe read a short plaque, but it wasn't very interactive. And I remember my grandparents taking me to Chicago, and they had push button museums. And I just thought it was the coolest thing, that I could interact. And then more and more, you have Children's Museum, it's about touching the buttons, it's about the headsets, it's about different ways, like walking through a human heart, right? You walk through it, you're engaging with it differently. And I think, in effect, that's what Google is saying. Let's unpack AI separately. So let's put a pin on that for next. In terms of content, let's keep general, like 50,000 feet a little bit. What do you think, Eric?
I think a lot of folks, a lot of brokerages that are out there, they try to write the content. This is kind of alluding to what Michael was talking about. They try to write content, and they either do it very short, or they hire outside firms that write evergreen content. And you guys have all seen this kind of stuff, and it worked really good 10 years ago. In fact, I'll be the first person to say we actually bought a company 10 plus years ago, and this is exactly what they did, was just write this top 10 reasons to move, and 10 summer tips for your house.
Always 10.
Yeah, exactly. And so, that kind of content did work well for a long time when there wasn't lots and lots of these posts that are out there. And what we found is more and more so that these evergreen or these kind of posts that are like that just aren't ranking very well anymore for a lot of different reasons. The biggest one being, and I know you said put a pin in it, I'll say it for 2 seconds, which is a lot of these things now are the Gemini model, the Google model. Like when you type a search, you'll notice it starts writing like a chat GPT style response at the top because their large language model has gone out to the internet, scoured and figured out what are the top 10 things you need to do. And they're keeping the traffic on Google instead of sending it over to your
Right, to
site.
TripAdvisor, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, they're getting a lot of these sites are going to get crushed. But if you can provide something that those models can't, my biggest suggestion is if you're an MLS association or a big broker or even a small broker, you can comment on how the market's doing. And that is something that is very hard for an LLM, for Gemini or ChatGPT to respond back to without you custom feeding it data. And so those prompts aren't going to happen anytime in the near future. So if you can comment on how the market's doing and get very granular with it, like these cities, these subdivisions, if you have a subdivision with more than 2,000 or 3,000 homes in it, those are the kinds of content pieces that you can put on your site right now that are going to crush it in terms of people looking for, because that's what people want to know. How's the market? I heard interest rates are high, but I heard they're coming down. Oh, well, the numbers came out worse this week, and so they might tick back up. Those are the kinds of things that if you can be very responsive to the moment in time when you post the content, they perform very, very, very well
Well,
because people
okay.
on it.
You don't even know this, as God is my witness for people on this call, but we are going live with a product either this week or next week called Market Trends. That is exactly that. In fact, I haven't even shown it to Eric, which I usually do, which is we've been busy, an API or an SDK of market trends, of market data at the neighborhood level, because nobody's doing it. And to your point, I do think this, I'll segue to you, Emily. I do think, like, Emily, before we hit into AI, please, about content freshness. Like I literally sat down with our data engineer yesterday. I'm not gonna lie, we were having a drink, and I said, "How often is that updated?" He's like, "Weekly." So I'm like, "Okay, good, thank God," because a lot of what some of the leaks said was about content freshness. So Emily, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, doing something different, etc. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think Michael touched on this too, where it's not like set it and forget it, right? You have to, it's an ongoing strategy. And part of that is, as the algorithm updates, and we know it updates all of the time, even though they just gave us this leak, things will change again. Like we need to be testing, that high quality content on the page, but making it interactable and testing, keeping it fresh by moving things around. And how do your users interact with that content versus someone else's? That is one way to keep things fresh, is like layout of page, interactability. But it really is an ongoing strategy, right? You can't just do one thing one time and expect to continue to rank for those keywords, especially as, markets change, the economy changes, there's always going to be new questions that need to be answered. And you as a broker or an agent, you have the expertise to be able to answer those questions that people are looking for that they're not going to be able to get, elsewhere, especially for their specific market.
All right, perfect. So let's segue into AI, because I actually think that's a perfect segue into AI, and I'll tell you why. So I was in New York for a bunch of meetings, and we do feed our data into, and there'll be an announcement tomorrow for the big player where we're feeding our data into their large language model, right? So our scores are proprietary to us, they're unique, just like Eric said. So, but in some of the meetings, not the one that's being announced tomorrow, they were like, well, we'll just download the data one time. And I said, well, this is a question for data providers, by the way, with regard to AI. And as it relates to SEO and everything and content and your content strategy and SEO and SEM, I'm like, yeah, but the data changes. It's true. What people don't realize about AI and these large language is like trash in, trash out, right? So if you're not keeping as God is my witness, this company sat there and went, oh, shoot, we should update the data. I'm like, yeah, you think it doesn't change? Like, it has to be quality. It has to be alive, you just train the model and assume that, let's just say schools, for instance, never change. They don't change a lot. but neighborhood boundaries change. Things change, right? Real estate is a living, ever evolving beast, and you have to move with that. So with regard to AI, I mean, how does AI factor into that with content and with that strategy and with large language models? And how will Google view it? Will they view it as stale, the way almost like teachers, like grabbing a paper, right? They're reading and they grade the paper and they say it's like basically plagiarism, or will they view it as differently? I think, Michael, you said it in our prep call. We were just talking about this, so maybe you can kind of go out of the gate on this one.
I mean, and I want to be careful because anything I say right now could be misconstrued, and obviously it's
Sure.
a topic. But I would say if I were in a broker,
And I don't want to tilt it one way or the other,
I'm trying to figure out how to use AI to my advantage. It would be around ideating. It would be about generating topics, ideas about kind of how we could frame things up. It'd be using it to generate subject lines, potentially things like that. But then I would really be still relying on humans to write the content or prepare the content. Like your comment and like Emily's comment, I'd be talking to my agents. I always tell brokerages, they're like, we don't know what to write. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know what to write? You have thousands of people in your agent's cars every single day, and the agent is talking the whole time. That's what to write down, is what the agent is talking about as they drive clients around, right? So I think I would just be leaning into that piece to think about how to do that. AI, I think, is great for generate versions, and all these kind of things, but I would not be using it to write original content now. And Google has been very clear on this, and Eric and Emily can back this up. They do not penalize AI generated content.
I know, right? This is
AI
really
content is boring and stale and can be found everywhere. They're like, it has no value. Just like if a human wrote boring, stale content, and that just won't rank well. So proceed with caution, but use it to scale more than anything.
But I think you're right. It's a fact of life. We have AI generated content. We were very careful about how we generate it to make sure that it's meaningful, but we get the question from the larger players all the time. Can we add to it? And it's like, yeah, we can give you the base so you don't have a person writing 10,000 neighborhood profiles. We have that product. But if you want to add a comment or add a line about, that'll not just for SEO point, not just to make it like pick up a keyword, but to make it relevant that it's clear you're the local expert. That at the end of the day, the end consumer for SEO or SEM wants to feel that you know what you're doing, right? And whatever gets you there in effect, right? And that goes to engagement, which goes to SEO.
And if I could just underline something you just said, if there was one thing I took away from the document, it was the keywords, right? They all sorts of indicators in there that they look at keywords. And we've all known this, but I was surprised at some of the titles and the metadata. They're penalizing
Me too.
use of keywords, right? And so their models have gotten sophisticated enough that like anything that reeks even slightly of keyword stuffing, they're penalizing. So
Yeah, it's been great for us, to be honest, because the other thing they said on it, and then we go to Eric and Emily. The other thing they said about it was that they really like content that's engageable. They're looking for videos, they're looking for, they're looking for stuff that causes people to engage. You're smiling, Eric, so I'm gonna let you have something to say. I know you do on this.
No, I mean, I think I'll take it one step. My suggestion is one step beyond what Michael suggested is I have seen brokers and MLSs get very good quality content from ChatGPT or some of the other ones that are out there. And I think it's a function of prompting. Prompting is going to become very, very important over the next 5 years.
And you mean like what do you ask it in effect?
Yeah.
Are you asking it the right question?
So for example, one of the things we advise our clients to do is always start with write at least 500 words about, and then the topic they want to talk about. Why? Because Google prefers longer form content over short form content. And so that very much, but the key to it, I would say, is that ChatGPT can write it, or these generative models can write it as long as you have a human edit it. And I would say that, where in the days when I owned a content company, it would take 2 hours for an employee to write a post, and then about an hour for an employee to edit the post, and then, post it to the website. And so we factored in 3 to 3.5 hours per post for the employee time. I would say that you can bring that down now to between a half an hour to an hour to edit the post after you've prompted it correctly and get rid of the entire writing of the post to start with. If you do that, and you really kind of reword it a little bit here and there, you're going to be, we have found that you're not getting dinged. Google has been very clear in overt communication, not just in a leak, that AI generated content, it is a misconception that it will not rank. They said that it has to be unique and higher quality content, which in my mind comes from somebody adding a little flavor to a post that is pre-written by ChatGPT and bringing it home to something else, or linking, intralinking. By the way, intralinking, super important. I can't believe we've gotten through 40 minutes here and we haven't talked
I
about
know
it.
that's
So intralinking inside of your website, incredibly important. And so if you can take that post, give it a little flavor for your local market, and really dial it in to who you are and your brand voice, and then make sure that parts of that post link back to other places on your website. For example, the homes that are for sale in the market you're talking about, or market stats, or community pages, or anything like that. That is going to rank. You will get traffic from those posts. So, and the reason why I chuckled, just to finish and put a point on it, is you know, I don't know if you guys have seen all the video work that's being done in these generative models that are out there right now, or image work that's being done. That one yesterday with Apple Intelligence, the images that are coming out of that are pretty low quality. I would say they're more for like sending your friend a meme rather than business related tools. But if you look at some of the stuff that's coming out of Chat GPT, or the OpenAI, the parent company of Chat GPT, and their video content, and their image content and things like that they're putting out, it is very high quality, to the point at which you're going to be able to take your data set, type it into their system, and say, make me a 30-second video that explains how the market's doing. And it will come through and explain it in perfect words with the background, and put the stat numbers and things like that with an explanation on it. If anybody on this call, if you haven't played with ChatGPT for Omni, it's an O with it, it just came out as a free trial on anybody that doesn't have a paid account on ChatGPT. You can start talking to it, and it's responding back to you in 150 milliseconds. It's absolutely incredible as far as that, plus the generative videos, images, things like that. So
well, I do think, and I'm looking forward to our release tomorrow, but and also I'll wait, but I do think there's some cool stuff out there. We're excited to be participating, but I think you're right. I think we're looking at a shift in how people search, how they engage. And I do think like SEO has to shift with that, in effect, right? And I think Google really, and I'll let you talk about this, Emily, in effect, Google is shifting. This whole point of this document is that they're recognizing this change in the way content is generated and the way people are interacting with that content, right? So I don't know if you want to talk about it. And then I'm going to take one last topic before we call it on how do you know who to hire for this? But Emily, let me go ahead and please talk on this for a minute.
Eric and Michael really hit on kind of the biggest points. Like, AI is a tool in your SEO arsenal, and we're all human beings, right? And even subconsciously, I'm sure you've all seen the images where something's just like a little off. You can't really put your finger on like what's wrong with it, but like subconsciously we can tell what's AI content versus human content. And so that editing process is important, right? And when thinking about local logic, adding that human written content to the top is going to exponentially help with that ranking. So really doubling down on your efforts, you know, that high quality AI written content plus that editing and that SEO knowledge and local knowledge that you have combined together is really how you're going to get to the top of search.
Okay, so you get to go first on the last question, which is really about, since you've been so patient, about, because it's a good segue for staffing for SEO. Like, I was thinking of an analogy when you were talking about that you have to have a multi-pronged approach. Agents can send out postcards all day long, but it's often they met the person at the party, then they got a postcard following up, right? I'm telling you, in career sales, you have to find a million ways to touch people, right? And that really is a lot what you're saying. So if you're staffing for this, what do you recommend in terms of like consultants or like in-house, or how do you do that,
of course, I'm biased. Working
It's
in
okay.
mainstream media,
You
and
get
I'm
your moment of
a
being biased. Everybody gets one.
IRS.
Do it.
With that being said, I think, and going back to, it's not one size fits all, right? And at the end of the day, you're an expert in your market, and like, you don't necessarily have to set aside a ton of money or a ton of time to do this, but do something, right? Put some of that expertise
Yeah.
out there and just kind of start the process. If you're kind of looking to take that to the next level, that's when consultants and third parties can help. But especially with the AI, like coming to market a little bit more easy, you can take, what used to take, as Eric said, 3 hours to do a post, spend an hour. Once you figure out, your brand voice and how to communicate that effectively in a prompt, you're able to be a little bit more efficient and scale that if you are thinking about in-house. But I think also looking at experts who know the real estate market and know SEO and content is always going to be, a good option.
Yeah, I think the one thing, and I'll go backwards, forwards, I'll go to Eric this time and end on Mike, but I do think like, it's a good point really about like one size does not fit all. The other thing we keep saying is you can't do a one-off, right? You can't just, do that one-off and then say, well, I wrote that and wasn't that great for me? And maybe you even got a pop from it. You got a nice pop, but one pop does not give you an SEO strategy or SEM. If you're just going to go like this, like it has to build progressively. And so what about Eric, your thoughts on this?
So, from an easy answer standpoint, the short answer is our recommendation is if you want to do SEO and you want to have high quality content on your site, you really need somebody local. You need somebody that's in your market that understands the market to write the content. We advise bringing people in or hiring your vendor or asking the right questions, which I'm going to come back to in just a second.
Sure.
The vendor to know how to set up and structure your SEO content, advise you on high level 50,000 foot ideas of content. But there is just something different about having that person that's in your market, even if they're not full time. This person can be a contractor, somebody that's a writer, find an English major or something like that at a local school that likes to write, or find somebody that knows how to prompt well and then understands and can read data that you provide them on editing the posts from ChatGPT or another generative model that's like that. Because the problem is when you hire an outside firm to write content for you, how good of a job are they going to do if they're not local to your market? They're going to be more high level items. They're going to be less local items for the most part, right? Unless they bring somebody on that's local. So I think it goes back to the thing I said, which is asking the right questions. And we were all bouncing this around before we jumped on this call. We were talking about asking the right questions of the vendor. And that's what it really comes down to. If you're going to hire somebody to write content, ask the right questions of how do they know my market, or how do you plan on them handling this or that to make sure that the content is high quality. Ask them questions. Do you check our Google Search Console on a regular basis? Are you looking at an analytics platform like Google Analytics or some other similar tool that's out there? How often do you review these tools? Do you provide me reports on how the content is performing? Do you provide me reports on where the things rank on different pages of the internet? Those sorts of questions. Ask your vendor, and I called this out when we did our prep call. There is a vendor out there that launches websites and then doesn't tell you that they no index the entire site unless you pay them a fee to remove that. Now, without too geeky, no index, you're telling Google, don't show any content on my site on Google, right? And so then they use that as a thing to try to get a few more bucks out of you to do paid search advertising or something along those lines. So we'll be asking those questions. How often do they update, or are they looking at algorithmic changes like the thing that just came out that's out there? How often do they update the structure and the schemas of the website to figure out, hey, something new changed. Hey, we can get open houses on there. That was a big one. So many vendors out there, when schema came out, nobody was doing open houses at events. They were all trying to do it either as real estate or anything. Those weren't showing.
Yeah.
People that figured out how to get open houses as an event to show up on Google. Those are the people that you want to be talking to. And if your vendor is not doing that, you need to be asking the right questions of why is this not happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need an expert, right? You need an expert for sure. I think that's a good call. I'm gonna let Michael talk about his consultant. I will tell you what's interesting is as somebody who sells a product that is often used for SEO purposes, we have gone before some of the largest companies in the world, and they'll say, well, we have this, to your point, we have this SEO consulting firm. And it's interesting. I've been vetted. We are on Redfin. We've been vetted on it by a number of sites, Realtor.com, by their SEO, either in-house or consultative, Meredith, and we usually do extremely well. But to your point, because we pass through and such, and we're used. But it's interesting that I think it's a different set of questions this is what I was thinking in my head while you were talking, Eric, for a larger company than it is necessarily for a brokerage. So for instance, yeah, we have products that are great for SEO for large companies, but I think some of our SDKs and widgets are better for engagement for smaller companies, right? So you know what I mean? So it's like different. So Michael, I'll let you talk about that. There are APIs, there are SDKs, there's content, there's, you know what I mean? Like different things for different, we come full circle here, right? To what do you need? Why do you need it? What's your goal? To Emily's point, don't expect to not do it now and then do it later, or maybe you're just never going to do it, you know? So Michael, I'll let you kind of close us out on that as the consultant on this.
Yeah, I would say that to me, and if you think about my background largely as a CMO, I think you have to have strategy, right? At the end of the day, you have to have a strategy,
Right.
understand why you're doing the things you're doing. And that doesn't mean that those things shouldn't change or you shouldn't adapt or you shouldn't try to learn from them, but you have to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, not just because the brokerage down the street's doing it. And if I see something in the industry, there is a lot of copycats. There's a lot of lemmings running over the cliff together in good company because they just see somebody else doing it. So I like Eric's thing about asking questions. I think you got to understand what you're trying to accomplish and aligning your tactics to your strategy. So if your goal is to have a general awareness in your marketplace, you want people to find you, you want people to kind of associate you with being a local expert, you want people to see your agents as being somebody valuable that they can talk to, I think you have to kind of set the pieces in place, to Emily's point about laying the foundation from an SEO standpoint. I think the other thing that happens in our industry is brokerage leaders, whether they're CMO, CTO, or an owner, they often feel like they're working in a vacuum or a silo, and that they're talking to a vendor, and the vendor's telling them something, and they don't know whether that vendor's selling the bill or goods or whether
Sure. Yeah. Right.
So I am going to do a little bit of a shameless plug. T3 this past year started the T3 website rankings, and the purpose of the website rankings was solely so brokerage leaders could see how their site ranked against other sites and be like, wait a second, why is that site doing so much better than me? What can I learn from them? So I would just say, if you're a brokerage leader and you want to go out there and you want to learn more, just Google T3 and you will find a resource, and at the core of that resource is the Benchmetrics platform. And Benchmetrics gives brokers the ability to look at all their Google Analytics within the context of the industry. There's more than 500 real estate brokerage websites up there of all different platforms. Go in there, set your site up. It's free. T3 provides it as a free service to the industry, and you can look at your data and you can see how it compares to your competitors and the people around you, and you'll know if your tactics are working. Work with your partner, with your website vendors like Eric, like Emily, make those improvements.
And I think you've all actually, I wouldn't even say it's shameless plugs, to be honest. As I conclude this, I think you've all shown your expertise. And I was thinking about your point about finding community, whether it's through what T3 does, which is fantastic, but about working in a vacuum about this. Look, I do think this is a very niche topic. We've had everybody stay on the whole time. We had a pretty good number of signups, but this is a topic that's sort of a hard one. Like I like to think I know a little bit about SEO, but then I read Google's article and I just had a million more questions. Luckily, my VP of marketing who knows it distilled it down for me. But avail yourself. And to Eric's point, talk to one vendor, try and ask a series of questions, whether you get them from T3 or online, or you say ChatGPT, what should I ask about SEO? And listen to the answers and learn. You know what I mean? You don't have to be an expert, but use your common sense. I'll leave you with this thought. Since I started in this industry, I always try and think as a consumer first, not as a salesperson or a vendor or an industry leader, or whatever. I try and think that, how does it affect me buying a home or selling a home at the end of the day, or renting a home, or as a property manager or whatever. We serve everybody. So like put your hat on first. You know, what would you want to hear? What would you want to read? What would you want to get out of that site first? And try not to lose track of that, because that is your North Star really at the end of the day. Well, all right, thank you, everybody. Hopefully I really enjoyed this for what it's worth. I am very selfish that I do the masterclass as much for my own enjoyment. So you have now officially, I should end them this way now, Mike, you have officially been at the bar with us and learned about SEO. So I hope you found it informative. There were no questions, which is absolutely fine. Again, if you have questions after, you know where to find these people. So feel free to go find them. And we'll send out a recording after. Send it to your marketing groups. I've had some people say I want to send it around to my marketing teams. So thank you to my panelists for joining, and happy Tuesday.